Hello YouTube, this is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I would like to talk about how to discover your role in BDSM and how to find your identity. I know for many of us it can seem very intimidating, it can seem overwhelming when we have first discovered the BDSM community to find out exactly how we fit into all of that. Are we a master? Are we a dominant? A top? Are we a slave? Are we a pet? What do all of these terms mean? And I can understand why it's so important to be able to find these roles and these labels that describe us, because for many of us, when we first discover BDSM, it's like discovering a missing part of you. It's like discovering something that was really there all along but that you didn't have words to describe. It's like can be such a revolution in who you are as a person. So it totally makes sense that you would want to have something you can use to quickly describe how you fit into this particular community and this particular segment of culture that you have found yourself in, for lack of a better term. But the sheer volume of choices out there, this sheer amount of different ways you can express yourself in kink and BDSM is just massive. I can definitely remember very clearly making my own FetLife account, which is one of the first things I ever did in BDSM was make a FetLife account, and being presented with, right after I made my account and I first logged in, I had to, pick a username. I had to decide where I wanted to put my location and what I wanted to put as my age, and then I had to pick a role. And on FetLife, you're just completely inundated with all of these choices. Again, you could be master, dom, pet, slave, Kajira, Hedonist, exploring, evolving. There's so many options out there. And furthermore, beyond FetLife itself, there are possibly even infinite options for how you describe your BDSM and how you describe your relationships and your power exchange and all of that. So what I want to do in this video is go over some tools that you can use to help yourself discover where you fit into BDSM, what potential roles might work for you, and how to evaluate all of that. And before I get into it, I do just want to make very clear that you don't have to pick just one label and settle on that. You don't just have to pick one and you're done and that's it. You only get one option here. That's not how it is at all. Beyond just being on FetLife, being part of your local community, people change, especially when you are new in kink. And I'm making this video primarily for people who don't really know how to identify at all, don't even know where to start. But as you're going through kink, especially the first year or two, but definitely the first 6 months to a year in particular, you are going to evolve so much in what your interests are, what exactly enthuses you about BDSM, what you really, really enjoy playing with and seeing, exactly the kind of amount and type of power exchange you want. When you just go headlong into the community and start going to dungeons and mungeons in particular, you're going to have so much evolution and change. So if what you find doing this process is that you pick one label at the beginning and maybe it completely changes, maybe it only changes a little bit, that is perfectly okay. You're not locked into any of these options for any reason. And in particular, if you're somebody who finds that they identify as a switch, it's very common for people who are switches to have periods of time where they maybe primarily feel dominant but still bottom to things, or maybe they primarily feel submissive for several months and they're only dominant to one person. And especially with being a switch, it can be even more confusing, and I really, really sympathize with all of you wonderful switches out there, because that is in particular very, very difficult waters to navigate, because other than just calling yourself a switch, you have even more potentials for where you could want to be. And as well, beyond just being a switch, you can also have multiple different overlapping identities and different overlapping ways that you do your BDSM and the ways that you describe your BDSM. So for me, for example, I would generally call myself a submissive as a general term, but within that, I also identify as a service submissive. I am also a pet. I am also Primal, and a bunch of other things too, like a rope bottom and all that stuff. So you don't have to pick just one. Even if you primarily identify as an S-type, or you're only an S-type and not a switch, you can still have multiple overlapping labels that you use to describe yourself. And that's actually where I want to start this whole process, because I know for a lot of you, you're not even really sure maybe if you identify primarily as an S-type or a D-type or a switch, and it's going to be probably easier to work that part out first before you try to identify maybe some more of the specific elements that are generally assigned to an S-type or to a D-type. And a brief explanation for those of you who are not familiar with that terminology: an S-type is generally somebody who enjoys being on the receiving end of a BDSM relationship or in a BDSM scene. So that means that they like to receive the actions, and they are generally also people who enjoy giving up power within an authority transfer, within a power exchange. A D-type is somebody who likes performing actions, and they like to receive power during an authority transfer or a power exchange. A switch is somebody who can play on both sides depending on their partner, their mood, the activity. There's a ton of different ways that switches can be switches, and I do have a video about that, which I will link down below if you want more information specifically about switching in general and what it is. But moving on, how do you know if you like to receive action or to give up power in a power exchange? Or if you like to receive power, or if you like to be the one who is performing the actions? And I think kind of the best way to do this without actually starting to engage in BDSM is to think about some of the activities that appeal to you. Like maybe you perhaps have an interest in rope bondage or pet play. Picture that type of scene in your mind. Picture you being in that scene. What does it feel like? What role are you in? What perspective are you in when you picture doing a pet play scene or doing rope bondage or whatever activity? It doesn't have to be those ones. Whatever ones appeal personally to you. Are you the one who is crouching on the floor like a pet and walking along and going up and licking milk out of a bowl? Or are you the one who is holding the ball to throw it to play fetch? If you are thinking about a bondage scene, are you the one who is having the restraints tied around their wrists? Are you the one who is being tied down to the bed? Are you the one who is holding the rope? What sort of emotions are you having? Because at least for me, I can very clearly picture a lot of those scenes in my mind because I've experienced them. But even if you can't clearly picture them, think about the emotions that you are having in that scene. Are you feeling possessed? Are you feeling owned? Are you feeling controlled? Are you feeling humiliated, embarrassed, fearful, overpowered? Those are all types of emotions and types of scene energies that I would assign primarily to those of us who fall on the S-type side of the spectrum. And I'm assuming that those emotions are things that you want to be feeling, that feel like positive things to you, because in BDSM, even with emotions that are generally considered to be complex or negative emotions, like feeling afraid or feeling embarrassed, those can still be positive things, and those can still be positive energies that we play with. Although, generally speaking, the people who are feeling those feelings are going to be S-types. Now, if you're somebody who may primarily be more of a D-type, a lot more of the emotions that you are going to be feeling is feeling empowered, feeling in control, feeling respected, feeling like you are on top of the world, feeling like you are successful, feeling like basically like you have total authority in the situation, like you are the one who is in control. Not being a D-type myself, don't have as much exact terminology that I can use to describe D-type feelings, but generally my understanding is that if you are a D-type, the feelings you're primarily going to get are going to be more ego inflating, although, and I'll get more into this when we kind of delve down into the types, there are many specific types of D-types, and there are many different motivations for being a dominant, and not all of them have a very direct, strong correlation with feeling empowered. It can also be a place where you are feeling very nurturing, like you are feeling like you are caring for something. Like, it's kind of like, imagine like if you actually have a pet, or maybe you have a child yourself, the feelings that you have over, let's say, your children or your younger siblings or your pets may also be feelings that you could assign to being in a scene with a S-type or being in a scene with a submissive, because you're getting kind of that golden glow from having taken care of another person. And it's very difficult to explain, but you can also kind of have similar feelings when you are in service because you are meeting somebody's needs. But I don't want to get that into that very much here because it gets very complicated and it's kind of difficult to explain emotions just over video like this. So you have figured out that you are primarily an S-type or primarily a D-type. Well, within both of those two categories, there is many different labels and many different forms that those come in, because those are really the largest umbrella terms that we have for different identities within BDSM. The next level up from that I would consider is, do you want to primarily be receiving or giving an action? Are you the one who wants to be feeling sensations, or are you the one who wants to provide sensations? When you picture yourself doing a scene, are you thinking about the marks that you will get from caning? Are you thinking about the sensation of a hand slapping your ass? Are you thinking about somebody's fingers around your throat? Or maybe perhaps you are picturing the tingle in your hands as you are pressing against somebody's skin. You are thinking about the welts and bruises that your partner will have after your scene. You are thinking about the look that they give you and the feeling that they have in their eyes of fear and being not in control. And that can kind of help you tell, okay, are you the one who wants to be receiving the action, or are you the one who wants to be in control and be the one who is directing the action? Again, these are very general descriptions. There are many situations, and I do have a video where I talk about being both a submissive and a top and how that works out, where you may be a submissive who's performing an action in a scene, such as performing a massage, but those types of feelings of being in control and things aren't really brought up. And I will say as well, if you are thinking about if you primarily identify as a bottom or as a top, tops and bottoms primarily are not engaging in power exchange and are not interested in power exchange. So you may be a bottom if you are primarily interested in receiving sensations or even receiving intense emotions such as humiliation or fear, but you don't really want to have a power exchange relationship. You are interested in somebody having authority over you outside of scenes. You are interested in somebody having control over your life or say in what you eat or how you speak or how you dress. On the top side, it's kind of the same thing. You're a top, but maybe not a dominant yourself if you are primarily interested in maybe expressing sadism or being the one to provide sensation or provide some kind of stimulus to a bottom, but you're not really interested in being in control. You like feeling like you have power in the moment, but you're not really interested in long-term control that extends outside of the scene. You're not really interested in having to pick what somebody wears or how they speak to you. You're not really that invested in titles like Sir or Master or Lord. And on the submissive side, titles don't really have power maybe outside of the exact sensations they're able to provide you in a scene. So you might primarily identify as a bottom if you're not really interested in having somebody that you can call master. You're not interested in being told that you are a slave. You're not interested in having that kind of extensive power exchange going on. So that's how I'd figure out personally if I was thinking about maybe I'm a top, maybe I'm a bottom. Am I a bottom or am I a submissive? And that goes into my next category of thinking. Okay, so maybe you thought about it, and while you think that you enjoy receiving sensations, you are also interested in power exchange. So how I would think about this is, and especially because a top and a bottom is not necessarily a perfect one-to-one correlation if somebody is a submissive or a dominant, but it is very closely, so for the sake of this video, I am going to simplify it a little bit. I would be thinking about, as a submissive, are you somebody who needs structure? Are you somebody who needs somebody to be in control of your life? Do you desire to serve someone? Do you desire to have the needs of others be greater than your own? Do you have the desire for somebody to be able to pick out and have authority over certain aspects of your life, even if that means that they say no? If you're a dominant rather than merely a top, and there's nothing wrong with the difference between a submissive and a bottom, just as there is nothing wrong with the difference between a dominant and a top, but generally speaking, a dominant, beyond just wanting to express sadism or provide sensations to a bottom, they also want to have extended control over what is happening in somebody else's life. They want to have authority. A dominant will want to be able to be, the best way I can think of describing this is to be somebody's number one in that person's life. Be the person that they go to for support. Be the person that they go to for any matter that they have self-doubt or questioning on. Be the person who gets to make the final decisions in choices in somebody else's life. So for example, clothing or food choices, or just generally being shown deference and respect. Do you want to have a relationship where you're the one who is going to be the one who calls the shots? Do you want to be put on a pedestal almost? Do you want to have somebody who is worshiping you? Do you want to have somebody who seeks out your advice in all things? Somebody who has great devotion and respect for you? And again, not a dominant, so I can't exactly describe all of the emotions and motivators for being a dominant, but that is a general sort of thing that I get from people that have been my dominants, that they enjoy about being dominant more so than just being a top. And you can also, again, be both of those things. You can be a dominant to some people and just a top to others. You can be a bottom to some people and a dominant to others. You can be a submissive and a bottom, any combination therein, and you can switch between the two as often as you like. And that is pretty much all of the general identifiers that I would consider when trying to determine what my role is. Now I'm going to be going into some more specific subtypes within these categories. This is not an exhaustive list because with BDSM, one, it's what you make it, and two, there are just pretty much infinite ways of doing your BDSM relationships and different labels and names and terms that you can use. So feel free to get creative. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just going to be kind of more of a general overview of what I have noticed to be the most popular or the most common terminologies that people use to more specifically describe what their submission or dominance or their bottoming or topping looks like. So the first most common identifier that I see outside of being an S-type in general is a brat. So a brat is somebody who likes somebody to have authority and control over them in some capacities. It's somebody who is generally also a masochist, so somebody who likes receiving pain, but is not necessarily the kind of person who likes to sit there and take it very demurely and politely. They are somebody who is going to backtalk a little bit, usually. They are somebody who is going to kind of fight and wrestle. They are going to be people who primarily like to sort of test their boundaries. Somebody who is a brat usually likes to act up, they like to poke buttons, they like to see how far they can push. And it's really a way of sort of reassuring the boundaries of the relationship, reassuring them that they are really under control, that they are, you know, really the one who is not in power here. And especially for brats that are masochists, it can also kind of be a way of sort of justifying or making it sort of easier to process one's masochism, because you're like being punished or being reprimanded for something, or being put in your place, and that's why you're having pain. And so sometimes there can kind of be this internal dialogue that goes with brattiness that sort of internally justifies why you are a masochist or why you enjoy or deserve pain. But beyond that, really a brat is just somebody who likes to kind of be submissive but fight back about it. They're not going to take it laying down. They are going to have a dominant or somebody who is going to have to prove it to them that they are dominant, that they deserve to be the one who is controlling the submissive, or the one who is, you know, giving pain to the masochist. Beyond that, there are also people who are primal, and this is one that is something, it's kind of almost like a subtype. Like you can be primal and be anything else simultaneously. So you can be a primal master, you can be a primal top, you can be a primal bottom. It's sort of like like a topping on the ice cream of what your particular S-typeness or your D-typeness looks like. And this is something where I have been meaning for a really long time to make a video about it. It is kind of a nebulous topic and difficult to discuss. I do have a podcast episode where we talk about Primal and what it means to us, the people on the podcast. So link down below for that if you want to check it out. But the way that I would discern if I were primal or not is being primal is very much focused in having instinct to be the one that is in control. Having instinct be the thing that is the motivator in scenes and in the relationship. You can be primal and self-structure. You can be primal and also not necessarily involve a lot of rough body play or you're even being sexual. It's kind of about letting down your inhibitions, not necessarily listening to your conscious, buzzing, active human brain and kind of letting that older, more primal, more primitive brain be the one that takes control and directs you during scenes. It can also be very fighty, although it tends to not always be bratty fighting. It tends to be more like prey and predator, which are two, labels that are very often associated and correlated with S-type and D-type within primal play. But it tends to be, again, more instinctual, more free, less actively structured in the way that more traditional MS dynamics would be, or more traditional total power exchange dynamics would be. It just is kind of more about like expressing very raw, intense emotions. It's about feeling your feelings as completely as possible actively in moments during scenes. It's about just taking off all of the layers of humanity and socialization and kind of stripping all that away and just playing with like the very raw power of what it is to be human, or as well some people will also kind of sub-identify as different types of animals, most commonly like wolves, bears, and things like that, and just taking all the way, playing on instinct. So if that sounds good to you, you might be primal. Moving on to the next category would be CGL, that is caregiver and little. These are also specific subtypes usually within power exchange dynamics, so they do exist in top bottom ways as well. But generally speaking, somebody who identifies as a dominant and wants a caregiver type role will want to be more nurturing. It can be softer, and I think sort of the type that has been popularized in people in sort of my age range is sort of more of the soft dominance of being a caregiver. But you can be a caregiver, be really heckin' strict. Like you can be a caregiver and be the governess that walks around with a ruler everywhere, or the really strict piano teacher that is not at all afraid to rap you right on the knuckles if you dare miss that middle C. It's something where it is definitely can be softer, but I would think a better way to describe it is you actively want to nurture and grow your submissive, and that can be a very kind of coddly parental love, and it can also be helicopter parent love, and it can also be tiger mom love. It can come in a lot of different forms, but it's primarily about fostering the submissive and seeing them grow and nurturing them in particular. This does tend to correlate a lot with age play as well. Age play and CGL, not 100% the same, but they do correlate a lot. But it is primarily about taking care of something and helping it grow and wanting your submissive not merely just to listen to your authority and to respect your authority or to have control during a scene, but also the motivator is about wanting to help another person, achieve actualization, or to be able to just take care of something like you would take care of a puppy. Which actually brings me into pet play, which I'll talk about next, how I would describe it. Again, not going to be perfect because I'm not a D-type, and I'm also not into CGL, so feel free to leave your own definitions for any of these terms and how you personally have found you identify with them. Please do, because these are just generalizations that I have observed and not at all based in like a rule book or anything like that. And on the flip side of being a caregiver is being a little. And I have a ton of videos talking about CGL and littles specifically, and middles too. Those are another type of somebody who is on this side of the spectrum. And so links down below to those and to the playlist where I talk about those more in depth. But a little is basically somebody who is generally submissive or bottom, but really wants to engage primarily in emotions and feelings of being secure, of being looked after, and being cared for. And if that sounds like something that you would like to do, definitely look into it. And these are very closely related to pet play, because a lot of times taking care of a little and taking care of a pet can look pretty similar in terms of the kind of emotions that are being played with, but the scene elements tend to be a lot different. So for somebody who is an owner of a pet versus a pet themselves, a lot of the motivators can be very similar. But I think the differences in what I have noticed for people who are primarily motivated to be in one of those two categories, or maybe they aren't both, is that the makeup of the scenes is a lot different. So for a little, maybe you're engaging in things like coloring books, or in discipline spankings, or in eating from plates and bowls that are like princess themed and things like that. Whereas somebody who is a pet may want to do scenes where they learn tricks. They may want to be locked up in a crate. They may want to play fetch. And so while both of those things can be very much from the perspective of wanting to take care of something, of wanting to train something, of wanting to help something grow, and vice versa, wanting to be trained, wanting to have somebody look after you, wanting to be under somebody's, control because you are somewhat lower on the totem pole in maybe a more literal sense, because that is what the particular type of power exchange appeals to you looks like. And those are some general ways that I recommend for helping discern some different types of roles and different identities within BDSM that you can choose from. Again, don't feel like you have to settle on just one. You can definitely change over time. You can definitely change between partners, and you can definitely identify as multiple things at the same time. All of those are totally okay. And in particular, if you're interested in this primarily for FetLife, or even if you're just entering the community, there are a lot of options that don't have anything to do with having to pick anything in particular. So for example, there are things like Evolving or Kinkster or Hedonist that you can use as kind of placeholders while you find yourself, or you may find that you just find so many different elements of BDSM appealing that is what makes most sense to you, is just to identify as a Kinkster because everything seems really awesome, or a lot of things that maybe seem conflicting have equal value in your identity as somebody in the BDSM community. So I would like to end this video on the note that you may not really know what speaks to you and what you identify as until you actually get out into the scene and actually start having scenes and having relationships. You can spend 5, 10, 20 years convinced that you are a slave and that you need to be in an MS dynamic and you need to be able to give up complete and total authority, and then you get in that situation and it does not speak to you whatsoever. Or maybe you think that you just cannot wait to be in pain. You just have to be a masochist and you're so excited for a spanking, and then the very second that somebody's hand touches your ass, you are just not okay with it and you never want to feel that kind of pain again. It's too intense and it does not speak to you the way that you thought that it would. And it can be very hurtful to end up in those situations and think, oh yes, I'm going to be this one thing, and then it doesn't work out. So I always recommend that you don't get overly invested in identifying as one label until you get a chance to try it out, because you may find something that you thought would never work for you works for you, and you may find something that you were convinced was the entire meaning of your life is not actually the case. And I don't want anybody to set themselves up for failure. I don't want anybody to think that any label is better than the other or is more superior or anything like that, because it's really just about what works for you and going into things like a blank slate and not really having expectations, maybe having an idea about what you like, which is what the point of this video is to give you kind of a course for determining what you will most likely enjoy. But it doesn't mean that you have to enjoy it. It doesn't mean that your current self-assessment is the one truth of your life, because without any actual data, without any actual experience, you could find that your experience completely changes your perspective and completely changes how you were expecting to identify. So just keep that in mind. Allow yourself room to grow, allow yourself room to evolve and change, and maybe not be what you expected yourself to be. And as well, again, you can evolve over time, you can change labels, you can be different things with different people, you can switch. All of that is totally okay. You are not locked into just one thing. BDSM is primarily about whatever individually speaks and works for you. So that is all I have for today's video. Hopefully you guys found it interesting and helpful. If you did, please leave me a comment and let me know. If you haven't already and you like this video, please do subscribe, because I make videos twice a week. And finally, if you really like this video, I would highly recommend you check out my Patreon, which has a ton of really cool perks and rewards and exclusive chats and exclusive monthly videos and all that cool stuff. So if you want to, please check it out. Link will be down in the description box. I will also have links to my social media down there as well. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.